Hello everyone, this video is about words and key concepts that are used by Madison, who calls himself Publius, as a nom de plume. But I think everyone knew it was Madison who wrote it. Madison uses some words here, and so there's some key concepts. And all I'm doing here is showing to you what I do as a reader when I feel like I need some background or some explicit definition of the kind of words and concepts and ideas that an author is using. And what I have here is just dictionary definitions from the Merriam-Webster online and mostly Wikipedia. So nothing I say here will be my idea. But I think that with this essay, Federalist number 10, which Madison published, I think, in 1787 as trying to influence the Constitutional Convention and what sort of country this would become. I think that reading this especially, we have to have a sense of some of the key words that he's using, and this helps tremendously in understanding what he's getting at. First and most important, I would say, the key concept or the central concept of this essay is faction. The Merriam-Webster online defines faction as a party or group, as within a government, that is often contentious or self-seeking. And I think it helps quite a bit with Madison, is that factions are groups of people within a community that have a common interest and are selfish, self-seeking. And his big contrast is between those who are committed to the common good and those who are committed just to their own particular good as a group, and a faction would be the latter. If you look at some of the definitions of faction, they explicitly say that a faction is a minority group within a larger group. But we should remind ourselves here that it's key that for Madison, the most dangerous faction would be a majority. And that's quite interesting. That is, a majority that would oppress a minority, or a majority that, pursuing its own selfish interest, would invade the rights of minority groups within the community. But that notion of a faction as a party or group, contentious and self-seeking, I think really helps us. That is more or less the general idea he has of a faction. He is advocating for a republic as opposed to a democracy. And so what is a republic, and what is it that differentiates a republic as a form of government from a democracy? Well, I think that's something that is in the background here too, that we have to clarify for ourselves. And this is just from the Wikipedia page for republic. A republic, from the Latin res publica, public thing, public affair, is a form of government in which supreme power is held by the people and their elected representative. That's the key for what Madison is getting at, is that a republic differs from a democracy in terms of a direct democracy, where the individuals take on directly the ruling of the state, just the people as a whole, the individuals, without being elected or without, they all rule themselves directly. Whereas the key there is elected representatives. That is, that in a republic, classically speaking, the elected representatives, the people have to appoint the representatives, but then those representatives, as representatives of the people's will, then actually pass legislation and run the government. Interesting etymology here from the Latin. The term originates in the Latin translation of the Greek word, the ancient Greek word politeia, which is actually the Greek title, the original title of Plato's Republic. There was no word republic. It was politeia, which is an interesting word. I don't know it that well, but politeia comes from polis, which means city. And so it's the political community of the city. Cicero, famous orator, politician, and author of Republican Rome, among other Latin writers, translate politate as res publica, the public thing, the public affair. I think res means thing. And it was in turn translated by Renaissance scholars as republic. So this is the history of this word, republic. The word republic comes from the Latin term res publica, thing public, or literally means public thing, public matter, public affair. So what's really important for, I guess, something being a republic, it's not a monarchy or a dictatorship. Sovereignty ultimately rests with the people, and only representatives who have been appointed by the people are legitimate, because the sovereignty, again, is from the people. The people own the state and rule themselves indirectly through representatives. Now, this is to be contrasted with a democracy, which is a Greek word, demokratia, which means the power is to the people. Kratos, or power or rule, is with the demos, the people. So the people have the power, as opposed to the rich, some minority of rich people, or an aristocracy, or a king or a queen, or an emperor, or something like that. So democracy is a form of government in which the people have the authority to deliberate and decide legislation. That would be direct democracy, which Madison is obviously arguing against. Or to choose governing officials to do so, representative democracy. So I think a republic, at least in my mind, I'm sure that there are legal scholars and political philosophers and political theorists who make a big distinction, meaningful distinction between representative democracy and republics. But it seems to me that a representative democracy is a republic. That is not a direct democracy where the individuals directly run the government, but where they have representatives that they elect to run the government for them, to act out their will. Direct democracy, or pure democracy, is a form of democracy when the electorate, which is everybody, decides on policy initiatives without elected representatives, proxies. So this is important because I think when Madison mentions democracy or thinks of democracy, he is thinking of direct democracy. He is not thinking of representative democracy as being a danger. He is thinking of representative democracy as being the solution, because he's thinking of representative democracy as republic. Finally, federalism, which is I find this a very difficult term to nail down, but after all, this is called the Federalist, and Publius Madison is a Federalist, and so what he's proposing is federalism, which is a term that means different things at different times and different contexts. The general Wikipedia definition of federalism: a mixed or compound mode of government that combines a general government, the central or federal government, with regional governments, provincial, state, cantonal, that would be Switzerland, territorial, or other subunit governments in a single political system, dividing the powers between the two. So the basic idea of federalism is that, okay, the United States consists of these 13 states, which used to be colonies. They will continue to exist as not only geographic, but political entities with governors and state legislatures. But there will also be a federal government, a unitary government that exists beside them. And then we get to this idea that the federal government has to be above them too, right? This is the big point, I guess. A different place in the Wikipedia article, it says, in the United States, federalism originally referred to belief in a stronger central government. And so this is what Madison is pushing for, is a federal government that would actually be strong enough to survive and to allow the country to survive, in his mind. When the U.S. Constitution was being drafted around 1787, the Federalist Party supported a stronger central government, while anti-federalists, like Jefferson, wanted a weaker central government. This is very different from the modern uses of federalism in Europe and the United States. The distinction stems from the fact that federalism is situated in the middle of the political spectrum between a confederacy, which is what existed between the end of the Revolutionary War and the adoption of the U.S. Constitution, a confederacy of states with no central authority, and a unitary state, which would just be wiping out all the distinctions between states and just having one big political group. The U.S. Constitution was written as a reaction to the Articles of Confederation, under which the United States was a loose confederation with a weak central government. So I think that these are the kind of things that, obviously we looked them up for ourselves. It took me 5 minutes on Wikipedia and dictionary to do this, but it'd be quite helpful. I mean, some of the things we read, the terms and the ideas are quite obvious and familiar, and it doesn't really matter whether we have exact definitions of them. But something like this, which is so situated in political distinctions like democracy versus republic, and what a federalist is and what a faction is, I think it can be quite helpful just to make sure that we understand the terms that he's using.